which is now indeed on, I hope. Yes, it is. So welcome everyone to our weekly call on all matters relating to encrypted DNS. As you would have seen, hopefully from my email earlier, Joe has kindly agreed to give an update on the Comcast DOE server. So we'll cover that off first and then sort of move on to cover any other matters. So without further ado, Joe, let me just hand over to you. If you want to screen share anything, you can. If you just want to talk, that's completely fine too. You can just talk instead.
Yeah, it was a long weekend, so I didn't have any slides to put together, but a lot of this stuff is in my head and I can share it, pretty easily. Thanks for reaching out, Andrew. It was nice to hear from you. So yeah, as everybody's aware, we have, been production live for quite a few months now. We've been part of the Chrome experiment. We've been, we were announced that we were part of the TRR with Mozilla. Since we've gone those routes, we have seen, a nice uptick on traffic to our endpoints, spread out evenly, to the point that, it seems pretty streamlined and seamless to the end user. I personally use DOH on almost all my devices and don't notice much of an issue. Just network issues that I run into here and there. Since the TRR has been announced, Mozilla has been, slowly ramping up that traffic to our endpoints. And we've been seeing a nice uptick of, I think today we just reached, from when we originally did this, we were seeing, 6 to 10 to 12,000 queries per second. Now we're seeing about 100-fold of that. So, we're doing pretty good on that part. The connections, we were seeing, the low thousands of connections. Now we're, upwards to 100,000 plus, connections there that we're seeing across the board. So the service is humming along. We're adding more capacity as this goes along. We've had some really good feedback from Mozilla and from Google. There's been discussion with about Microsoft coming out with their, they're doing the OS. We're trying to figure out what we need to do on our end to be a part of that as well. We don't know exactly, the ins and outs of how they're going to implement that, and I know it's part of the beta, so it's hard to deduce what's what and who's who and what, where we're seeing all the traffic from, if it's from one, client or the other. But we are able to handle the load, and it's been pretty awesome. The crazy thing is, our regular DNS has just recently started hitting over 1 trillion queries a day because of back to school and because of, everybody doing things virtually for school. So, we're seeing just a sliver of that being DOH. Like, it's just a very small piece of the pie that's just, we're not going to notice those queries unless we're looking for them. I think it's a good path to go down. I think everybody that, that's looking to do DOH should at least try it out and try to get it going, because, the growing pains are kind of not going to be painful going forward for us. We've got a good platform. It's moving, we have a good path forward with the vendors we're using. So I think that, the more that we have the communication between people like us on these calls and the working groups to try to figure out the next steps, I think the big pain point, and a lot of people will agree, is that, trying to do a advertisement, or who's going to be your DOE endpoint based off of your provider, and that's going to be the biggest. That's what we're trying to figure out on our end, on how can we work with clients and how can we get into working groups to do the right thing. I know Glenn Dean has been chair of a lot of that stuff as well. Our next steps are just continued growth, continue more points of presence for our DO endpoints, and DOT. DOT is kind of our next step, and we're really just trying to get that ramped up. I'm hoping to get that out there sooner than later. And that's about as much as I can share without going into too much detail, but that's how we're doing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Joe. We'll take questions, but one maybe to start with. I mean, in terms of scalability, I know before anyone was really deploying DO at any scale, there were some question marks as to how well the servers would scale, and whether you'd need to throw a lot of silicon at it. Well, what have you found on scalability?
On how we're implementing it, the scalability is going pretty well. Like I'm not concerned with the way that DO is progressing to be put out to be used by clients. You know, the way that Mozilla is doing it, the way that Google would be doing it, and even I would hope the same way that these two browsers have been doing this, that the clients like Apple and Microsoft will kind of go on this, like, we're going to ramp up and we're going to not just turn it on for everybody right away. And because I think that's the big scare for, at least on our end, is, you know, leadership's like, well, what if the switch gets turned on right now? How are we going to handle that? I think right now, given how it's adopted, we're fine. And I think, you know, we're going to grow with that growth of how DO is being implemented from a client perspective. We are still going down, you know, other paths of how can we use Silicon, how can we use, you know, SmartNICs, how can we use, you know, FPGA, how, you know, those are kind of, you know, the things we want to look at. I think everybody should look at those things. With our current hardware and our current setup, I'm pretty comfortable. It's still a concern in the back of our heads if that switch gets flipped, but it's, you know, we do have options to try to take on that load. And I think, you know, we always go back to, like, I go back to my leadership and I'm like, look, if it got turned on by everybody today and we got hammered, the client should be smart enough to say, hey, this is failing, fail back to DO53. And to the client, it should be seamless. You know, you might notice some delay, but it should be fairly seamless. And that should be, you know, what I think a lot of people should think about is like, okay, well, the client's doing the right thing, then, and the client should want to do the right thing because people want them to use their clients, that, you know, then it should fail back gracefully, and there shouldn't be it should be kind of seamless.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I think for things like same provider auto upgrade, that absolutely is meant to be the case. If I recall, I think with Microsoft Windows as an example, and I think Chrome as well, if you hardwire a specific encrypted DNS into it, then it will fail closed, at least with some of those.
Yeah.
On the basis if you manually configure as opposed to being an auto upgrade.
Agreed.
But yeah. Okay. I can see Jim's put a question on the chat, which I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that. So Jim, thanks for the question. So we are not looking into the specific OS and specific apps currently. You know, we're trying to keep this as secure and privacy conscious as possible. We do, you know, we're seeing a good spread because, you know, this is open to the world for us, but, you know, the way we have it set up, we can kind of say, oh yeah, this, you know, we're seeing more coming from off net, but to be honest, a lot of this is coming from on net. It's, you know, it's really been organic from the, from Mozilla and from Google, the Google experiment. But as far as that, I'm not able to, you know, I'm not able to see much more of who's doing more and which specific app is doing more. Yeah. And I think some, you know, like a lot of people are using, you know, Brave browser, and a lot of things are you know, the agents are tied to Chromium. So it'd be hard to differentiate if it's Google itself or if it's a fork from Chromium doing that thing.
Yeah. I mean, on that, Joe, have you seen any particular uplift after, say, the TRR arrangement went live or anything like that? So even though you're not looking for the source, whether you've seen
So
any...
yeah, when as TRR went live and you know, the months after, we've seen that ramp up from Mozilla, and we've worked closely with them to, you know, just to make sure that, you know, they're being good netizens and we're being good, you know, we're responding the way that we should. And it's been, you know, we see a direct correlation from that. So, you know, I don't know exact numbers, but, you know, I know that from the Mozilla portion of it, we definitely seen a bigger uptick than the experiment from Google. When the experiment from Google happened, we saw a bigger uptick up front, and it's kind of been steady from that.
Right.
And so we've kind of, yeah, so we can deduce from that data that Mozilla has definitely given us, you know, is steering traffic to us, and you know, we're happy to be a part of the TRR, and we're happy to see that happen. You know, it's good. You know, the teamwork there has been awesome. I can't, you know, I can't say anything bad about that. That's been pretty good to work with those guys.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have questions in terms of the sort of Comcast's learnings and how they might relate to some of the stuff that I can see some of the other ISPs are on? So anything that's prompted for you at all? And if somebody's asking a question, they're on mute, just as a helpful hint. Give them a moment to think. Just while people are thinking, Joe, I mean, based on what you've learned so far, is there anything with hindsight you would have done different?
Sorry, I got my daughter over here trying to get on the call. she's trying to help with this DOE stuff. Come on, baby, gotta go. You know what? In hindsight, I don't know what we would do differently. I maybe look at, you know, more than just 2 or 3 vendors that are doing this, but just in the beginning that were providing the DOE translator. In the beginning, there were just a few of them, so we had very little to work with. I think that, you know, the best thing that we did is started working with some of these vendors closely and saying, hey, these are our needs and this is what we want to do and this is how we want to do it. And we also additionally internally did our own DOE translator during a lab week project, because we wanted to know how this worked. We really wanted to make sure that, you know, this didn't come up and slap us in the back of the head being like, hey, why you need to catch up. And, you know, we wanted to be like, all right, we understand this. We know how this works. We can identify DOE traffic on our networks, and, you know, those types of things were very valuable in the beginning. And looking back, I think we were doing the right things at the time. And, you know, being a part of all these groups and keeping open communication and open minds of trying to share the information that we're able to share with each other has been very helpful. I know when we first did the beta part of this and we opened it up to everybody, there were a lot of people from this distro that had given a lot of great feedback that you know, helped us move forward. And I think those things are awesome. I think that shows a community coming together and really trying to push forward something that, you know, we're all going to have to deal with. You know, DOH I don't see this going away. I see more clients in the future adopting this. And then, you know, we got to look at, you know, DNS over QUIC. We got to look at, you know, DNS over TLS, and what are we going to pick and how are we going to pick it? And is it going to be is that going to be the thing that the client's going to use? Or, you know, do we have to have this mix of everything? Is DO53 always going to be there? Yes, I believe that's always going to be there, but is that slowly going to be replaced? You know, and those are the things we really want to look at and move forward. So.
Yeah, or because I guess if you're hitting 1 trillion inquiries a day on DO53, that's going to take a while to shift over to encrypted, I would think. Okay. Again, give a chance for anyone else to. I can see Brian has come in as to whether there's any correlation between IPv6 adoption and DOE adoption, and whether you have any stats on that. I don't know if you have.
Is IPv6 a thing? No.
Oh.
No, I'm a big IPv6.
You've just muted, Joe. Or frozen. One of.
That IPv6 adoption is going very slowly and begrudgingly, you know, but no, I have not seen a correlation with it.
Okay, yeah, that's clear. Have you had much customer feedback at all on the on the DOE resolver? Has that come in at all?
I have not. I personally have not heard any customer feedback. I haven't seen anything on the Twitter sphere or anything in social media about it. I mean, when it first happened, of course, you.
We're missing a bit, Joe. I don't know if it's my end or yours, but
I think it may be his end. It may be somebody being clever with a mute bar. Joe, you're coming and going on mute. Your audio comes and goes.
Your lips were moving, but the sound wasn't coming out.
Yeah, my internet. I got to talk to my ISP.
Your video was good. It was the audio that dropped out.
Yeah. I think maybe your computer switched to a different microphone, a different input source.
No, I'm getting unstable internet connection coming up. I just dropped VPN, so hopefully that works a little bit better. So yeah, back and forth. We don't see much. As far as people saying, "Hey, yeah, DOH is this thing that."
If anyone's wondering, I think the sound has dropped out again. We could do a fun voiceover.
Well, the VPN then.
Try and pretend what Joe's saying.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let me stop my video.
That's probably that's not a bad plan. Try that, Joe.
Okay. I don't know how much of what you heard.
Virtually nothing, unfortunately.
All right. So your question was about have people talked about the DOE and reached out customers? I have not heard much from customers. There's not, it's in the beginning we saw some, like when there was the announcement of the TRR, we saw some, back and forth on Twitter, but other than that, nothing.
Right.
It's entirely possible that in the world of DNS geeks, such as everybody in this call, we're all very hyper aware of this, but nobody else is.
Yeah.
Which actually would kind of be like IPv6.
Yep.
Exactly.
When it works, it just works.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, for that matter, DNS. I mean, let's be honest. Most people have not got a huge awareness of it, so that wouldn't be surprising.
I'd agree with that, but boy, do they notice it when it goes wrong.
It's always DNS when something goes wrong.
I mean, when it goes wrong, the support just melts. They can't cope.
Well, I didn't say the corollary, right? When it works, it just works. When it doesn't work, it really doesn't work.
See, whilst we've been talking, Ian has rather helpfully suggested perhaps you could mime your answers. I was going to suggest interpretive dance, but
I think as a host, Andrew, as a host, you need a sign pre-printed. Just you can put up on your screen saying like you're on mute or we can't hear you, or you're frozen.
Yes. Yes, I'll have to.
In fact, Zoom should have had that built in as a button for the host, just to push that, and it pops up on the on the person who thinks they're talking screen.
That would be handy.
There's a patent. If Zoom's out there, there's a patent. I just gave you a patent.
Yeah, duly noted.
A method for non-responsive user feedback.
Visual cues.
Right, has that prompted any constructive suggestions, comments from anybody else, as opposed to how Joe could deliver his answers? Has that sort of prompted any thoughts from anyone?
So I've got a question for Joe. So I'm always curious to know, what is the relative ratio of encryption overhead to actual processing of DNS queries? So have you got any stats on the lines of how many queries there are on average per TLS session? If you're there, Joe.
Sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
My internet just dropped. So was there another question or?
Yes. So I'll repeat the question. So yeah, I was just curious to know the ratio of encryption overhead to actual DNS processing. So do you have any stats on average how many DNS queries are served per TLS session?
On TLS, we're not, we have like a very, very small beta for TLS versus DOH. So I'm
assuming that DOH is over TLS.
Yeah. So so we're, as I mentioned earlier, we are currently on DO53 seeing over 1 trillion queries a day. That equates to about close to 18 million queries per second. So we are, I am probably seeing 1% of that, if 1% of that being DOH traffic.
Yeah, but my question was more within the DOH traffic, are your customers setting up a new TLS connection to you on 443 and then sending you one query and then closing the connection? Or are they setting up that TLS connection and leaving it open?
Yeah, that is, it's staying open. We've been able to notice that we have a connection, it stays open. The way we have it set up for our capacity kind of goes on a close open query type of rate, like how many connections per second can we take, and how many queries per second during those connections per second can we take. But where we stand from the client, from where we stand with the clients, connections aren't closing until the client's closed, or until there's a reestablished come from them. But yeah, we're not seeing a quick succession of connections per second and a query associated and back and forth.
That's just as well then. So you've got relatively few new connection setups to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's helping with the scaling.
That's definitely helping with the scaling, and that's one of the things that we talk to our vendor often about. I personally would like to find ways that we can keep the connection open a little bit longer, reuse that same connection for the client, based off of our vendor, and being able to move forward with not having to close the connection unless it's RFC compliant or it needs to, and go from there.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else want to jump in with a question? Take silence as not. Well, in which case, whilst the connection's up, Joe, thank you. That's most helpful. And even though it's only a small fraction of your overall DNS traffic, I think others may find it encouraging that it is scaling so far pretty smoothly, because I think that's probably more traffic than many of the other, certainly the trial services are hitting. I'm not sure about the likes of Quad9 and Cloudflare. I see Jim's come in with a final question then, which is, I think I might know the answer to this, but have you seen anything yet since iOS 14 dropped?
I have not. I think that, you know, since there's no definitive way, I think from Apple right now to pick a provider, I don't know if there, you know, I don't think there's a way. We haven't seen anything.
Oh, I'm surprised no one's tried, or at least no one significant. I mean, I created a profile just for fun for myself, just to play around. And I'd say this: iOS's implementation seems to be faster than Firefox's. I don't know how. It's just faster. Same service, same other endpoints, and Firefox is distinctly more laggy.
That could be, I wonder, Alistair, if it's related to where the code's executing, right? So I imagine the iOS stuff is executing deep into the core of the OS, whereas Firefox is, you know, up in user space. So that could account for the difference in performance. But
it's really different. I mean,
well,
for a while I thought, oh God, I've made the profile wrong, and I had to go to debug the DNS side to say, do you really go here?
I guess well done, Apple, then.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if somebody were to produce some actual, you know, publishable comparisons between the different implementations, just like you mentioned, Alistair, like sort of do a bake-off. Now that we've got a few in hand, that would be those would be interesting numbers.
It's somewhat tricky to get the numbers, but that's yeah.
Well, maybe we'll make a start perhaps next week if you've time, Alistair. We could perhaps
someone lend me their Apple account so I can with a developer license on it, so I can
just do a chart just to show Mozilla versus Apple. That'd be kind of interesting, just to see the difference.
You know, to that point though, you know, if you look at the iOS adoption rate, I have no stats on if it's being adopted or not officially, but I can tell you in my own household, we have 5 iPhones, and one of them is running 14. The other 4 are still whatever version my kids, because they just sit, they don't upgrade unless somebody, you know, forces them absolutely to. You must upgrade. They do not.
So that will be a few weeks before that rolls over, then probably with the user base. Because don't they auto upgrade eventually, unless you not to?
No, it's just that apps start not supporting the old iOS versions. And that's what generally pushes people. It's quite simple. You are not allowed to publish things for the old version. Therefore, sooner or later, something comes out that people want, and it forces everyone.
Yeah.
I'll notice the other shift that, you know, also anecdotally, that, you know, since we're all at home, I think our phones are being used a little bit less. The desktops have become the preferred way they're interacting with the world these days, as opposed to their phone, because they're just not out of the house.
Yeah.
At least my kids, because we're in California and we're still on lockdown, right? So.
Yeah. True.
So we're not sitting at restaurants and they're not turning to their phones to drown out their parents.
Yeah, which of course nobody else's kids do other than yours, Glenn, surely.
I'm sure, but you know, that's one subtle, I think, impact of the pandemic, right? Is that we might see slower uptick rates on certain mobile operating systems. I'm no ill will to Apple or Android, but you know, just it's a different function, different world these days.
Yeah, that's fair.
Roll on macOS then.
Yes, I'm not seeing the dates yet for Big Sur when that's coming out. So maybe that will make a difference when that comes out, and if that hypothesis holds up.
It might, although I think a lot of people are still holding back the old OS because, right? Don't forget, when you do that big upgrade, you lose support for 32-bit applications, right? And so if you have any old games that you used to be playing, they might stop working.
Yeah, and actually, I always forget, of course, anyone with a corporate device, there will always be a lag anyway, but there often will be before that's allowed on the corporate systems anyway. Okay, well, that takes us nicely on to AOB, I think. So, yeah, thanks again, Joe, for for covering that. That's much appreciated. We'll maybe sort of ask if one of the other ISPs can sort of jump in the next few weeks and reciprocate and share any stats where possible. But does anyone have anything else they would like to cover whilst we're on the call today? Give you a chance to think. You've hopefully...
Actually,
oh, go on, Jason.
Just a quick notice. We actually Charter just deployed 2 DOE trial clusters. I'll probably send that out to the list just so if people want to bang on it and see if it's if it's working as expected. It'd be good feedback for us. And we were also added to the next DOE Chromium trial. So that'll, I'm not sure if it'll branch in 87 or 88, depending on timeline, but we'll be partaking in that study as well.
Ah, excellent.
And then on an entirely different note, for IETF 109 in the INT area, a few of us, Jason Livigood, Yuli, and I, have proposed a birds of a feather session request for MAC randomization and more along a problem statement and then community feedback from IETF on if it would be interesting to discuss it there, because it's being discussed in many other standards bodies as well. But if we want to talk about it from a, have everyone weigh on the problem statement and then see if it might be an interesting area to pursue further discussion. If you feel like weighing in, that's in the, you can just look on the BOFs for 109.
Okay, I'll have a look and put a link with some notes then for that. Okay, that's helpful, Jason.
It's being discussed on the INT area mailing list.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else want to come in with anything? Give you a moment to think. Well, perhaps whilst you're thinking, we've had a few discussions about ECH and the implications of that. I'm still, I've got a sort of a 2-page sort of briefing on that, but I'm still struggling to get sort of validation, certainly on the ISP side, as to what the real world impacts might be on your network. So again, for those of you sort of in operators or ISPs, it would be fantastic for you to have a look at the draft and then say whether there's anything you can add to sort of flesh out or what the impacts might be, or equally, if you don't think they're significant, to push back and say that you're pretty relaxed and you don't think that some of those are that significant for you. Either point of view would be very helpful. So I'll put something out again with the notes on ECH. And the reason I mentioned that, so that segues neatly into why to say so. If anyone was either on the interim TLS working group session last week or has subsequently looked at the notes, I think the working group has now completed all the outstanding issues that were on GitHub. So looks like it might be now making progress towards completion within the working group. That's my unofficial interpretation of the status, I hasten to add. I don't think I've seen anything from the ADs or anything like that, but it certainly looks like they're getting towards the back end of completing the outstanding work at least. So it might be starting to move forward in the standardization process. That being the case,
and of course, so I was just going to say, as per your weekly news, we know Putin doesn't like ECH.
This is true. Yes. Yeah, Russia has certainly followed suit after China, and I will belatedly say, because I know Paul Vixie sort of flagged that mid last week. Anyone that saw Paul's keynote from roughly 12 months ago, where he was highlighting that there would be repercussions from the move of encryption, it was sort of end-to-end on the network. So he was, I think he's proving to have been completely correct in his prediction as to what the knock-on effect would be. Whether it's China, which is probably expected, but now Russia, I'm sure there will be others that will follow suit in the fullness of time. So two things on that. One is if you've got some input you can provide on the briefing document, that would be fantastic. But also, if it's of interest, to take a look at the last working group notes, which I think are now up on the data tracker, because the ECH working group does seem to be making substantive progress just at the moment. Albeit if you did attend either of the two last interim working groups, for those that perhaps are not immersed in the subject matter, it's a somewhat a dry subject, I have to say. Maybe that's just me. Okay, anything else anyone wants to bring up whilst we're gathered together? Sort of last call for any other business. I'll take silence as not. So to that point then, thank you all for your time. If you have time today, I think DNS OAuth is running through as we speak, so you may wish to take a dip into that. There's a lot on at the moment, so plenty to keep us interested, I think. But have a great week, everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.